A major Canadian bank has released a poll with perhaps the most obvious result in the history of Canadian polls. As it turns out, when competing on the international stage in athletics, Canadians like to win medals. In Ontario, according to CIBC, 75% of residents believe it is, quote, important, end quote, for Canada's amateur athletes to perform well internationally. Well, yeah. The question, then, is how to win all of those medals, and the focus of that question inevitably turns to funding. In Canada, government is responsible for most of the funding. There is Sport Canada, which is a branch within the Department of Canadian Heritage. Over the last year, it has given out $26.28 million in funding to 2,458 carded athletes. For individual carded athletes, and those are athletes who either have met requirements or who compete in sports that have met requirements, this can mean up to $18,000 annually in funding to compete in their sport. There are also various provincial funding mechanisms. In Ontario, for example, there is Quest for Gold, which can be worth a few $1,000s to an athlete. There's also Own the Podium, the not-for-profit group that helps direct funding to all of these athletes and sports. In a recent question and answer session posted on Swimming Canada's website, Own the Podium CEO Anne Merklinger said the group was, quote, no longer in the business of trying to be all things to all people, end quote. They want medals and they mean business. They've already invested more than $57 million into the next Olympic cycle, which is for the next games in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil next summer. But the problem? What happens if you don't qualify? What happens if you don't win? How do you get money to get on the podium if you don't have money in the first place? And what if you stumble or move? Jessica Zelinka was one of the faces of the Canadian team heading into the London Olympics 2 years ago. She was a track star and she competed well. A year later, her funding reduced. She was reduced to filming her own workouts with an iPhone. She had to balance the iPhone on a shoe on the side of the track. It's a bit crooked sometimes, she said.